sculpture made me into a pro because I made every possible mistake, and I'll tell you about my good ideas and my bad ones as I end up with a nearly finished sculpture at the end of this video. It all started with an original plasticine that I partly made in pieces and I partly cut into pieces in order to make the plaster molds to make the sculpture. Some of this video is the very first time that I started making videos of my work and of myself at work, so it's a bit spotty, but I'll do my best to describe in great detail everything that I did. And I also have quite a list of previous videos where you can learn all about this method. I'm Diane van der Zanden, and I'm an immigrant to subtropical Colima, Mexico. I live here with my husband and my 3 dogs. The rainy season fog is so beautiful.
I'm ready. Oh, I see.
Eat, everybody. Let's go. Let's eat, everybody. This is my breakfast. Okay, Rita, Nemi, come. Sit. Rita. Stay. Come, Gaga. Here. Sit. Ready, Rita? With you? Okay.
No shenanigans.
I think they might be related.
Yeah.
We love it here, and we live on a tourist loop where we enjoy the benefits of rustic restaurants, leche caliente, temazcales, and coffee tours. For those of you who haven't seen my videos before, I invented what I think is a new papier-mâché technique using authentic Venetian mask making methods in order to make hollow, lightweight, durable sculpture. I've stopped using Yes Paste, but these days I use PVA glue. I use a paper paste clay that I learned from Johnny Good at Ultimate Paper Mache, and I used threaded rod as my armatures. My husband Rogelio helps me make my bases and the plugs for the sonotubes. I also have a bunch of mold making videos on the channel if you'd like to look for those. This is the first sculpture that I made of this size, and unfortunately I used Yes Paste to make it. I didn't know when I started that the Yes Paste was going to soak up moisture, so it went through a whole bunch of changes to actually be a stable and sturdy sculpture at the end. Yes Paste wasn't great. That was mistake number 1. At the end of the video, I'll show you how I layered the paper directly over plasticine in order to make the final part of the base that I'm going to use to extend and make the sculpture a little bit taller. Unfortunately, I don't have the video of making the original part of the base. I hadn't started making videos yet. But with the parts of the paper ready to go, I decided how far I wanted the legs apart. I drilled holes in a piece of wood and I put threaded rod into that, long pieces of threaded rod with nuts and washers in order to hold the whole thing up. Then I put the paper part of the base on top of that, making sure that the threaded rod came out at the right spots at the top of that paper base so that I could put the feet on. I glued and clamped the flanges for the base together. At this point, I hadn't figured out that I could put paper paste on the inside and then use that as a structure to cut the flanges off. And then I used pieces of craft paper to fix the joint. So then I cut the flanges off bit by bit and worked the base bit by bit. And then I added the feet to the top of the base. I think one of the best ideas that I've had during this process is to use mortise and tenon joints to join these sculpture pieces together. But in this case, I tried to use a kind of mortise and tenon joint as a joint for the feet to the base, and that didn't work. It would have been much better if I had used a flat joint and just a nut and a washer on either side of it. So I ended up working a lot in order to fix that and make it structural. So that was mistake number 2. And here's the making of the legs, the layering up the craft paper inside the leg molds. I made those, I waited for them to dry, and then I attached them. And in this case, with this sculpture, I didn't put those legs together first. I put one part on the sculpture, and then I glued it in, and then I sort of put paper paste and glue on the other side, and I attached the 2 pieces together. Today I'm putting paper mache into the hand molds. I'm putting tiny little pieces of paper in order to not get air bubbles, mostly in the tips of the fingers. I let it dry and then I put another coat in. Boy, I remember working with this Yes paste. It was so nice to work with. It's too bad that it absorbs moisture from the air. Just use my knife and I go alongside underneath this flange, and you can use a palette knife. That will work just as well. It's a little bit easier on this one because I lengthened this a little bit so I could get underneath here, and they both came out really nicely. This one took a little bit of the mold with it. That's too bad, but it's fine. I can still use this mold over and over and over again until it really comes apart. But look at that. Isn't that nice? I think they're really great, and I'm so happy with them. I had the torso ready and I attached it to the legs. You can see that in a previous video. And other videos on my channel show how I use the mortise and tenon joints to put the pieces of the sculpture together. Then I decided that I wanted the sculpture to be smooth. I don't know why I wanted that, because I really like the texture, but maybe at that point I hadn't figured out how much I love the texture of the paper. Someone suggested that I use joint compound in order to smooth the surface, and I painted on joint compound, and it's really fun to work with. It's easy to work with a paintbrush and it's easy to work with a sculpture tool. But then I let the sculpture dry for a couple of weeks and it had cracked all up and down through the sculpture. So that was what, mistake number 3? Not sure which mistake I'm on at this point. Then I went back over the surface and I added, I don't know, 3 layers of craft paper pieces in order to stabilize and fix all the cracks. Finally, I waited for the driest part of the dry season when I knew that the sculpture was completely dry inside and out, and I drilled holes through the piece. I poured polyurethane, liquid polyurethane in through the holes, revolved, that's not an English word. I get my English and my Spanish mixed up sometimes now. Anyway, I made sure that it got into all of the inside of the sculpture, and then I shot in polyurethane foam. This was definitely the largest sculpture that I had made up until this point. I think maybe I made like about 4 sculptures that were finished, although I think I made tens of sculptures that never actually got finished, and hopefully I'm going to be able to finish them. My methods have completely changed over time, and I'm sure that there are lots more ways to do this technique than what I've figured out at this point. If you have any ideas, let me know in the comments below. The other thing that I learned is that water-based polyurethane will make the sculpture like warp and move. So that was mistake number 4. In a previous life, when I was making plaster sculptures, I treated them with oil and then I painted on oil paint, and that was a beautiful way of finishing plaster. I did finish one of these sculptures with oil paint. That's in a video that's gonna come still, but I don't love it because it doesn't show off the beauty of the paper. So I consider that mistake number whatever, 5, 6, 7, 10, 12. And then I suffered and I struggled and I tried to figure out, like, how am I gonna finish these pieces so that the surface of the paper looks beautiful. Rogelio had an idea about using wood stain because the paper is cellulose. So it makes a lot of sense. I bought an alcohol-based wood stain and we painted that on. And after that, we painted on matte polyurethane. And I think it's one of the most beautiful sculptures, if not the most beautiful paper sculpture that I've made so far. One of the best things you can do for me is comment below. So I took the sculpture in the house as a finished sculpture. Walking by it every day, I realized that it's not as tall as I would like it to be. It needs to be lifted up a little bit. And I decided that I'm gonna make a 12-inch base. There are some problems, like I'm gonna use PVA glue instead of Yes Paste, so the surface might look different. And it has 2 pieces of wood that look like flying saucers to hold the whole thing together. So I'll show you that too, and we'll see how we go with that. So I use the same technique as on the first base. I just made a plasticine base. If somebody buys this piece and I'm gonna make another one, then I'll make another plaster mold out of these bases. But right now I just made a plasticine base that was the right size and the right shape. It's kind of conical, it's kind of oval, and I could have made one out of sonotube, but I didn't want to mess around with the sonotube and try to make that work. Probably would have been better actually, now that I know what I know, but anyway, I have this base. Anna has layered 15 or 20 coats of craft paper onto this plasticine base. That's my dog, sorry, I hope you can't hear that. I'm gonna have to let that base sit in the hot box for at least 2 weeks right now. It's super wet, it's super humid. I just had to put anti-mold treatment on everything because I don't want to get any mold on this paper. And then we couldn't get it apart. And sometimes when the paper is damp, it's really hard to get out of the molds. So which mistake am I on? 7? Rogelio helped me to get the paper off the plasticine.
Should I take it?
Yeah.
Can I separate it from here?
Yeah. Oh, that's where my blue bucket is. I forgot about that.
You were looking for your blue bucket.
Yeah. Cool.
You see I can pull?
Yeah.
It's okay?
Yeah, you can pull. It should be very strong.
Yeah, it's a bit wonky because it was a little bit difficult to get off.
I guess it wasn't enough mold release. Wow. Great. Great, great, great. Thank you. Ooh.
No,
It was like no mold release. Wow. Cool.
But onward and upward we went.
So you're gonna have to clean out the plasticine out of there.
Yeah, Anna can help me do that, and she can help me put it together. I have this top for it,
Okay, cool.
and this top is the bottom of the sculpture that's in the house that's almost done, and it has the holes here that go to the threaded rod. So I'm gonna need your help to do something with this so it goes
to
into
make a
here,
make a-
and the same with the bottom,
No problem.
so that it goes
When you
into
have it
there.
together, then I can trace it.
Yeah, And then we can put something heavy, really heavy in the bottom so that it won't fall over in an earthquake.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We'll do that. All right, see you later.
Okay, see you, thank you. Stop recording.
I want to put the base together using PVA glue and clamps and putting a little paper paste on the inside to hold the thing together. And a couple of days later, she cut off the flanges and I started working on trying to make it look good and without seams. I made a cardboard bottom in order to insert the wooden ring of the plug. A lot of times when I make sculptures, I don't know what they mean. I don't know exactly what I'm doing. I'm not the best at drawing. I'm sure I could be if I put more time into it. I don't really want to draw. I really want to sculpt. And so I don't spend a lot of time drawing. It probably would have been better if I had at this point, but I go back to the fact that I don't know what I want at the beginning. I don't know how I want it to look. So even if I had completely drawn it out, I probably wouldn't have quite gotten there. So I wouldn't have known that I needed that base extension. My teachers always told me that sculptors need to draw. Like I said, I never really do that. I only do that enough to get my ideas on paper so that I don't forget them, because I definitely do forget them. And also, if there are any sizes, I do size calculations in order to make it work for me. Don't let lack of drawing skills stop you from making sculptures. The other thing about it is, after the sculpture is made, then I figure out what it is that I was unconsciously thinking about when I was making the sculpture. This sculpture reminds me of the story about Chicken Little, who kept saying the sky is falling. So I am holding up the sky with this sculpture.
Okay, it's down. It's the right size. Yes, good. Good, good, good. Okay. It'll be that much taller. That's the idea. But I have to make a plug on this so that it can fit down into here, and then I have to cut a circle into here and make another piece of wood with a plug that sets into there. And then I'm going to put weight in the bottom. I learned that in the last earthquake.
This is the original plate that Rogelio made for the bottom of the sculpture. He put a plug onto it with a donut so that I can push it in and tighten the nuts and bolts onto it at the bottom. Each piece is 12 and a 1/16. I made it just slightly taller than it needed to be. I didn't want it to be shorter. I didn't want to have to cut any of the paper off. That's a big, hard thing to do. So right now I'm cutting plastic. I'm going to put plastic around it, and then I'm going to add paper paste to the base in order to make it just a little bit taller. I think that artists can only represent themselves. At least I think I can only represent myself and what I have going on in my head. I would love to be able to be inside of somebody else's head. It's what I would say if somebody asked me what superpower I would like to have. Since I can't. But what I can do is be a product of my culture and a product of my surroundings, and I can show that. And I think that if I show that well, if my technique is good, that other people will somehow be able to relate to it. This group of work had a spark right from the beginning for me, working with my body at half size, and I actually literally measured my body, multiplied by 2 so that I could have it almost exactly half size. Or if it's, I love living here, I love living in the country, and it makes me happy and it makes me sad. That's the thing behind these sculptures. Also, that I can make the molds and that I can use them over and over again. Each sculpture tells a little bit of a different story about me, about what's going on in my head. But it looks more like me than many of the other sculptures that I'm making and that I've made. And for me, it's really interesting. And I hope it's interesting and useful for you too. So you're now looking at a Paper Mache Pro. The only issue I'm having right now is I have to leave the sculptures in the drying box, and I'll get back to you later with how I finished them and how they look. Thanks for watching. If you got to this point, comment with a shooting star.